Everybody says Indiana is cheaper than Illinois, but what do you actually get for around $350,000 on each side of the border right now? I mean real houses in the same general region around the same budget that a real buyer could actually compare. And once you line them up side by side, the biggest difference is not always what people think. A lot of times it's not just the bedroom count, it is the tax burden. So let's look at what about $350,000 buys you in Illinois versus Indiana in 2026, and more importantly, what kind of buyer each side actually makes sense for. Now real quick, here are the rules. I'm keeping this to single family homes, roughly the same budget, same general region, and real current examples. I'm also not pretending these are clone houses. They're not. This is not some fake perfect science experiment. This is more like if you're a real buyer shopping in this range, what kind of houses are you actually looking at and what trade-offs come with them? So let's start with Illinois. First one is in Homewood off Sacramento. This one is listed right at $350,000. It has 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, about 2,400 square feet, and it sits on over half an acre. That is pretty good space. This is not some tiny little box. It also has a detached 2.5 car garage, a partial basement, and honestly, this is the kind of house that reminds people Illinois can surprise you in this price range. Because when people talk about Illinois online, they act like everything around this price is either falling apart or completely unaffordable. And that's just not true. This is a legitimate house with room to breathe. But then you get to the taxes. The annual property taxes here are just over $10,265. And that right there is the story. Not that Illinois gives you nothing, it's that the monthly hit starts to feel very different once taxes get layered in. The next one up is Tinley Park off Coachwood Trail. This one is listed at $349,000, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, about 1,600 square feet, a split level layout, and attached 2-car garage. It has that familiar layout a lot of buyers can immediately picture themselves in. All of that makes it feel practical and livable. Now the list of taxes are $11,225, which is obviously heavy. There is another Illinois example where the house itself is solid, but the tax conversation is impossible to ignore. That takes us to Oak Forest off Ridgeland. This one is listed at $339,900. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, about 1,800 square feet, a split level with an attached 2-car garage. This one is near a park. It has updated kitchen with an island, stainless steel appliances, a sunroom, and a family room with a fireplace. So again, this is not some throwaway comp. This is a very normal, practical, suburban family home type of example. And I actually like this one for the video because it makes the Illinois side feel broader. It's not just one town doing all the work. But again, here comes the same issue. Taxes on this one are just over $10,365 a year. So this is where I push back on the lazy version of this conversation. Illinois is not giving you nothing at $350,000. You can still get a solid house in some south suburbs. The issue is of course the tax bill, because it can make a $350,000 house feel more expensive than the buyers expect. So let's go ahead and cross the border. The first Indiana example is off Lincoln Street in Merrillville. This one is listed at $339,000. It has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and almost 2,700 square feet of living. Important note here, part of that living area is finished to lower level space, so I'm not pretending all of it is above ground. But for a real buyer living in this house, usable space is usable space. So this house has a partially finished basement, attached garage, and taxes just $2,131 for 2024. Think about that for a second. We just looked at multiple Illinois homes over 10 grand a year in taxes. This one is a little over 2 grand. That is where Indiana starts punching hard in this conversation. Maybe the house is not perfect for every buyer. Maybe Merrillville is not the town every buyer wants. But on pure value, Indiana starts making a real case here. The next house is off Hickory Drive in Dyer. This one is listed at $359,000. It has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1,800 square feet. It's a bi-level and attached 2-car garage. Taxes here are $2,950. So honestly, this may be the fairest Indiana comp in the whole video. It's close to the target budget, it feels believable, it has updated appeal, and it doesn't rely on some weird one-off tax situation to make the point. It just shows the point. You can be around the same purchase price in a town a lot of buyers are actively considering and still have a dramatically lighter property tax burden than what we saw on the Illinois side. And honestly, that's what matters. So when you step back and look at the Indiana side as a whole, the biggest advantage is not always that every house is massively bigger. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. The bigger theme is that the overall value equation often feels better because the tax burden is so much lighter, and that changes the real monthly pressure on a buyer. Now here's the part that people miss though. Indiana's not one thing. Merrillville's not Dyer. Dyer is not Cedar Lake. And once you start getting into more premium Northwest Indiana towns like St. John, that can become a very different conversation too. You may still like the taxes better than Illinois, but you may still want the schools, the feel, the newer housing stock, or the town itself. But at that point, you are not just talking about bargain Indiana anymore. You're talking about choosing between different tiers inside Indiana as well. And that matters because some people talk about crossing the border like every Indiana town is basically the same deal. It is definitely not. So if you're actually trying to decide between Illinois and Indiana around $350,000, here's the better question. What trade-off fits your life better? If your top priority is lower property taxes and stretching your monthly payment further, Indiana is going to be very hard to ignore. If your top priority is staying closer to your routine, your people, your job, or a specific South south suburban location, Illinois can make a lot of sense because there are still solid houses in this range. If you want more usable space for the money, Indiana often has the edge here. If you care about a certain town feel, a school preference, a commute, or just where your life is centered, then the answer may have less to do with state line and more to do with the actual town. And that's why I don't think the smartest question is which state is better. I think the smarter question is which trade-off is better for you. Because at this budget, that's really what this is. Illinois can still get you a solid house. Indiana usually makes a strong case on property taxes and often on value overall. But Indiana is not one thing and Illinois is not dead either. If you had $350,000 and had to choose today, are you staying in Illinois or are you crossing the border into Indiana? And if you're choosing Indiana, which town are you actually going to choose? And if you like the housing comparison here and you want to see more, please hit subscribe and hit the like button also.